The strongest position for our lower spine is characteristically our standing position. And what makes it good for the lower back is that when we stand, there is a normal inward curving to the lower spinal alignment. Outwardly, that appears as a slight hollow to the lower spine, and we call that the lordosis of the lumbar area. Our strongest position is to maintain that, and that is why we always say that you lift with your legs. The purpose there is that it allows us to keep the spine with that natural curve, which is its strongest position. It allows us to carry the most load that way. On the other hand, the worst position, or weakest, for the lower back is when we get out of this curvature and we begin to curve it the other way, as when bending or leaning forward. The more you bend forward, the more the weight of the upper body is hanging out here unsupported. The more pressure is imposed on the lower spinal joints. And additionally, the more you bend forward, the harder it becomes for the muscles that control safe movement of the individual spinal joints of the lower back to keep those joints moving in a precise, coordinated, and controlled manner. Virtually all low back strain injury occurs as a result of some component of bending forward while you're under load. So if you bend forward and lift, or if you bend forward and you're twisting, or if you bend forward and you're doing tasks for a long period of time, as when, say, doing yard work, all of those are very high stress positions for the lower back and ultimately increase the risk of low back strain injury. The exercise about to be demonstrated is called the morning squat, and it is designed to help keep the body and your mind and your awareness of this low back curvature. Now, instead of bending at the waist or the belt line, which we described as being weak and undesirable, it is, however, the most common movement that we go to when we need to reach something down lower. It is, in essence, our default movement program when we need to bend forward. Unfortunately, the more we bend forward, the more potentially damaging effect to the lower spine, and even though we all do it, we pay a price for it ultimately. The option, on the other hand, is instead of our default bend at the waist or belt line movement, we can choose to bend from the hips, which means that our pivot point changes from the belt line or the waistline to the hip joint, which is about 4 inches below that. So pivoting from the hips would look like this if we keep the knees out of it, instead of bending at the back. So as much as we can make practical during the course of our day, we would like to use the hips more, hinging from the hips in preference to bending from the lower back. The morning squat exercise is very simple, but I want you to do it, number one, in the morning, absolutely. And that's because we want to wake the brain up and say we're not going to use our default bend forward movement today. We're going to bend from the hips, but we have to wake the brain up every morning, and that's why I want you to do it then. The second thing is I want you to make it part of your morning getting ready routine. I don't want it to be part of having to go exercise because you will forget. I would like for you to integrate it into your getting ready routine so that before you walk out of the bathroom in the morning with your clothes on, you've done the exercise. Personally, I suggest that you do it at the same time every morning, and I suggest doing it before you put your shoes and your socks on, do this exercise. The good news is it'll only take 1 minute, and to perform the exercise, we'd like to make sure that we maintain this lumbar curvature. So to do that, I suggest you place the back of your hands there just for tactile stimulation. And truthfully, I would suggest that you accentuate or exaggerate the low back curve just a little. And then the exercise is to do 12 squats while you keep awareness of that low back curvature. But with each squat, I want you to change the position of either one foot or both feet. And you can use all kinds of variations. The point being that we want to get the brain really happy and comfortable with the whole idea of pivoting and moving off of the hips. An advanced form of this would be to do a deep squat, and you might hold on to a counter to help stabilize you. So in addition to the 12 basic squats with the foot change positions, you can do a deep squat while maintaining that low back curvature. Go as deep as you can while maintaining. If you go all the way down, at some point there's no way to maintain the lumbar curve, so the very deepest element of the squat, you'll lose the curve. The point of doing it deep is just to keep that curve into as low of a squat as you can manage. So this is an exercise that I want you to do every single morning, and I want you to do it until you're too weak and crippled to do it anymore. Because if you stop doing this, our default movement program that we've all done for our whole life will come racing back and will begin to dominate, and you'll stop bending and hinging from the hips. Now, as much as practical during the course of your daytime activities, we want to hinge from the hips. And while we can't stop bending from the low back entirely, we can reduce the amount of bending by about 80%, which will have more effect on protecting your lower back than any other exercise.